Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that's all over the headlines, regional conflicts. We're going to break down how they shape our world, and more specifically, how a country like Malaysia finds its footing and carves out a role for itself in all this turbulence.
So let's just jump right in with the big question, right? When you've got these global superpowers making moves, how does a middle power nation even navigate that? How does it do more than just survive, but actually try to make things better? That's really the core of what we're looking at today. All right, first things first, we have to be on the same page. What are we even talking about when we say regional conflict? You know, it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but really getting what it means, well, that's the foundation for everything else we're about to cover. Okay, so here's the key idea. These conflicts almost never stay put. A problem might start inside one country, but it has this nasty habit of spilling over. Think about it. It can create refugee crises, mess with trade routes, and before you know it, neighboring countries get dragged into the mess. Those cross-border effects are a huge deal. So what actually causes these things to ignite? Well, it's never just one simple reason. It's more like a really dangerous recipe. You start with some long simmering tensions, maybe ethnic, maybe religious. You mix in some competing ideas about how the world should work, a dash of raw power politics. And then someone from the outside gets involved. That's the spark that can make the whole thing just explode.
And we see this playing out all over the world. Take the Middle East, for example. It's this incredibly complex web of history, religion, and geopolitics that has fueled conflicts for decades. And the shockwaves from that instability, they're felt literally everywhere.
Or look at the war in Ukraine. This is such a clear, recent example of a regional conflict that got amplified by what's called great power rivalry. It's not just about Ukraine and Russia. It's about much bigger players on the world stage trying to flex their muscles and expand their influence. And let's bring it a little closer to home for our main topic, the Indo-Pacific. The situation in the South China Sea is the perfect storm of a regional issue. You've got multiple countries with claims, big questions about international law, and massive economic stakes. And yep, we're definitely going to circle back to this one. You might be thinking, okay, but why does a conflict happening thousands of miles away really matter to me? Well, because in our world, everything is connected. A war over there can make the gas you put in your car more expensive. It can mess up the supply chains for your food, your phone, pretty much everything. These aren't distant problems. They have a very real impact on our daily lives. So the problems are obviously huge. What about the solutions? How does the world even begin to respond? This is where we get into the diplomat's toolkit, the strategies the international community uses to try and put out these fires. Now, diplomacy isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. It kind of runs on two different tracks at the same time. You've got track I, which is the official stuff you see on TV, presidents shaking hands, signing treaties. But just as important is track 2. This is the behind-the-scenes work where academics, experts, and other influential folks can talk freely, build trust, and float new ideas without all the political pressure. Honestly, you really need both for anything to get done. And there's a kind of ideal path you want to follow. The best-case scenario is preventative diplomacy, talking it out and building trust before things get ugly. If that doesn't work, you bring in a neutral third party, a mediator, to help everyone find a peaceful solution. And if the worst happens and a conflict does break out, that's when you have peacekeepers, like the UN, coming in to try and keep people safe. Okay, so keeping that global toolkit in mind, let's zoom right in on Malaysia. How does a middle power like them play this game? Turns out they have a pretty clear and consistent playbook they stick to. So this is really the heart of it all. Malaysia's whole strategy revolves around a few key ideas. First, working through regional groups like ASEAN. Second, always pushing for peaceful ways to solve problems. But the real game changer here is strategic neutrality. By not picking a side between the big superpowers, Malaysia can position itself as an honest broker, someone who is anchored to international law. That gives it a kind of influence that's way bigger than its size might suggest. Having principles is one thing, right? But how do they actually work when things get real? So now let's see how Malaysia actually uses this playbook when it finds itself in the hot seat. Remember the South China Sea? Well, Malaysia's right in the thick of it. But instead of flexing its military, its whole approach is what you'd call quiet and pragmatic diplomacy. It consistently points to international law and works with its ASEAN partners to try and create a set of rules, a code of conduct, to manage all the tensions peacefully. It's about de-escalation, not confrontation. And it's not just about territory. Malaysia has also become a real leader in what's called humanitarian diplomacy. Whether it's sending aid to Palestine, speaking out on the Rohingya crisis, or sending its people on UN peacekeeping missions, the goal is always the same: protect civilians and promote peace. It's really become a big part of the country's identity on the world stage.
So you can see a clear pattern here. Malaysia's path is to be a constructive player, a nation built on dialogue and neutrality. But let's be real, choosing that path is anything but easy.
I mean, the challenges are just massive. How do you stay neutral when the big guys are pushing you to pick a side? What good is international law if there's no one to enforce it? And how do you juggle what's best for your own country with what's needed for the whole region to stay stable? These aren't easy questions, and there are no simple answers.
So here's the big takeaway. In a world that seems to be getting more and more confrontational, Malaysia has really defined its role. Its power doesn't come from a huge army. It comes from a deep, consistent belief in talking things out, staying neutral, and working together with other nations.
And that really leaves us with one final thing to think about. In a world that's constantly demanding you choose a side, maybe the active, dedicated pursuit of neutrality and dialogue, maybe that's not just a smart strategy. Maybe it's the most courageous one of all.